Hello and welcome to the first series and first episode of Racerkarts Rifles. The aim of this series is for you to be able to walk into a shop with a wad of cash, walk away with the right rifle, buy the right scope to suit your needs, and also to then calibrate the rifle so that you know exactly where you're shooting at the exact amount of range. So let's get stuck straight into it. In this episode we're going to look at types of rifles, calibers and different materials for stocks. In the series later on we'll be looking at moderators, as I said before, scopes, and also, like I said, the calibration side of things. So let's start with the types of rifle that are available to you. You've got recoiling types, which are sort of spring and gas ram, and you've got recoilless, which are multi-pump, CO2 and pre-charged pneumatics. Now, spring gas ram, they recoil, so they initially jolt backwards and then as the piston slams shut they shove forwards again, so you get a nice sort of action. You can control that action, you're going to be a great shot no matter what you do, so they improve your techniques. They're a self-contained unit, as in you have a spring and a gas ram and a pellet. You don't need air cylinders, diving bottles, stirrup pumps, you know, them little capsule things, none of that. However, they are slightly awkward and eccentric to load, which goes with recoilless multi-pumps as well. So, you know, you have this thing going on. It's the same if you had an underlever type, which would be sort of stuck under here or hidden in the stock, and it would be, again, it would be that same, release it, yank it back, and you're good to go. Them things will last you a lifetime, they'll fire time and time again, and they are the cheapest form, but they're also one of the heaviest, with the exception of gas ram and multi-pump. They're quite light, but you can tune them, you can do a lot with them. This one's been massively tuned. You know, that's the only real downside of them. They're just a bit heavy and a bit awkward to load. If you've got a target in the field, you drop it, you get a chance for another one, you've got to go through that whole motion without spooking your quarry, which is generally on your back. It's not the easiest thing. Fumbling around for pellets to shove them in the pellet trap or in the breech. Recoilless, which are this one here. This is Air Arms S410 of mine. You'll be familiar with that. You'll also hopefully seen the review. These are very easy to shoot. They shoot more accurately than what these do as a result. So you don't have to be, you know, US Navy SEAL to be able to get, you know, pellet on pellet groupings. And you can do that quite easily out to sort of 50-60 yards. They're very easy to load, 9 times out of 10. You'll have some sort of bolt mechanism or side lever mechanism. You get the magazine or single feed where you just drop a pellet into the tray there, slam the bolt shut, away you go. There's the magazine, little 10 shot for this one. So yeah, the only one that isn't recoilless that's awkward to load is the multi-pump. Now the multi-pump ultimately has its own little stirrup pump built into it, and you would just grab the lever and you'd be constantly giving it this to charge it back up again. So definitely CO2 and pre-charged pneumatic. CO2 varies quite a bit in winter. Between summer you can get a slight power drop, but I've got to admit there's a couple of guys down at my local range, they swear by CO2, they've used it quite a bit. If you get the right capsules and not the cheap ones, once you do a bit extra, it's a bit like pellet, if you know what I mean. Certain pellets for certain barrels, certain capsules for certain rifles. They're very good, they're extremely light, and the shot count's pretty similar to what you get out of a pre-charged rifle. The only downside is that slight little power loss that you get. However, I'll be showing you how to cope with that later on in the series. So don't discount it. A capsule is much easier to carry around than a stirrup pump or a diving bottle, and it's also a lot less effort than constantly having to, you know, give it the old multi-pump. So in summary then, for that section of rifles, recoiling versus recoilless. Recoiling, they're great for practice and like pest control. You know, you just want to go out and bag yourself a bunny for the pot. And recoilless are great for much longer ranges and heavy pest control stroke competition due to their, you know, multi-shot capabilities. and recoilless actions. So let's move on to the sticking subject that everybody seems to get hung up on, but it ain't really that big a deal: calibre. I generally break calibres down to three areas: small, large and specialist. Specialist is more for FAC, you know, I won't really take any notice of that, so I'm not going to discuss it in this episode. But small I generally put down to 0.177 to 0.2, large 0.22 to 0.25. Specialist is anything above that or not on the gun shop shelf. But what you've got to remember with air rifles generally, you know, I'm only discussing 12 foot-pound, not FAC, is your power is fixed at 12 foot-pound. You can't fiddle with that. I mean, don't get me wrong, you can get it up to 12 foot-pound, but it's never going to go beyond that if you want to stay legal. Therefore, the weight of your pellet is going to be key. So the pellet weight and drag increases with the calibre, because there's increased size of head and increased size of material. This results in a bit more deviation from that line of sight that I discussed earlier. Ultimately, range on larger calibres is shorter by about, I say, 20%. You also, with this, get a slight phenomenon called increase in calibre. You get a slight phenomenon that I call lag and boost, or pellet lag and boost, and I'll discuss that later on as well in another episode. However, these larger calibres, they carry more velocity and more energy retention, so they have what I call more knockdown, and this increases with the bigger your calibre. Every single calibre has the ability to knock a rabbit down at 40 yards. So to summarise calibres, you've got larger calibre is more suited to closer ranges, and you need to keep it at the closer range to keep the trajectory manageable and make use of the knockdown. Smaller calibres better suited for mid-range, and they have more clinical takedowns. As for wind, well, it's 6 and 2 freeze in all honesty. Yes, one is heavier, so it shouldn't get pushed off course as easily as the lighter pellet, but it flies much slower. So it takes longer time to hit its target, it's exposed to the wind more. The heavier calibres do have a slight advantage, but you're only talking, you know, in like a 10 mile an hour perfect crosswind, you're probably looking at about 1/4 of an inch at 25 yards. It's not a massive amount, you know, but you know, it's something that I do factor in there because I want that bit extra accuracy, so it's worth me putting that in for yourselves. Okay, so the last thing I want to discuss is stocks that are available to you, and I break these down to 3 different types. Synthetic, which I don't have in front of me, wooden stocks, which are the more traditional, and then you've got the skeletal stocks, which I don't have, but if you can imagine this S410 here, with a pistol grip, all part of the barrel and the action, and you know, you've got a stock at the front end there that's designed as part of the main frame of it. You know, they're the lightest, but for me they're a bit exposed to the elements. They're usually fitted with all the bits of attachments going on to them, which is a bit of a plus. They're just not my cup of tea, but for some people they absolutely love them and swear by them. So consider that, you know, they'd be ideal for sort of moving around long ranges, you know, as in long hikes, etc. Synthetic stocks, which I don't have in front of me, but they're generally the similar shape to the wooden stocks. They're tougher, they don't warp in winter, you know, they're very weather friendly. They're easy to add QD studs to and work with. They can take a good bit of punishment in the back of a boot of a van or a car. You know, they're a tough old stock to go with. So if you're outdoors, it's not a bad one to pick. In comparison, the wooden stocks, they're heavier, they're more susceptible to damage, they can warp in winter, which causes leaks on, you know, air barrels, not so much on, you know, underlevers and this, that and the other, spring rifles and gas rams. You can split them when you're fitting QD studs. You know, if you get it all wrong with your drill sizes, you can crack them open. They can chip if you don't counterbore them. You know, you got to look after them a bit more basically. But for me, I think they look a lot prettier than synthetic. I think they look a lot better than the skeletal stroke tactical types that we're getting on there. As you can see, I'm a big fan of wood. There are stuff coming out now where you've got sort of wood, sort of semi-synthetic I would say, where you've got a wooden stock wrapped in a plastic, like on the Walther RM8s that they're bringing out now, and I think some of the old BSAs might be doing it as well. Time will tell whether they're any good or not. I've got one on the go at the minute. We'll see what it's like in a year's time. the final thing that I'm going to discuss in this episode is weight and balance, and then we're going to go and have a quick wrap up and apply some scenarios and pick some rifles from there. So weight is an important thing. A lighter rifle is going to be less fatiguing on yourself, as you carry it, but also it'll give you that slightly, if it's unbalanced, a bit longer time before your muscles start cramping up. That's why it's always important, with no matter what rifle the gunsmith brings out, it gives you a good chance to get it into your shoulder and give it a good hold, you know. Just in case you're watching this isn't a fanatical ISIS thing where I'm posing with a rifle in the camera to look big and butch like Putin. No, it's not. Yeah, no. So get it into your shoulder, see how your eye comes into the scope, or you know, try and get your eyes close to the barrel as you can and look down the length of the barrel and see how that feels. This Remington has always felt nice because it's such a nice tight stock, because I've got such a big fat neck and cheek. It's you know, it goes in there very, very nicely for me. And part of the reason I went with this one to modify it for field target work. As you can see, it's perfectly balanced for where I hold it. You know, I don't really have to do much, you know, lugging and pushing and shoving and this, that and the other. So that's something to consider. Weight wise, yeah, it is quite heavy, but again, it's a practice rifle. I want that extra weight to be able to help condition my body for frequency of shots, so standing, kneeling, etc, etc. I've even been known just to sit in the room watching TV with the rifle pointed at the TV screen in a sitting position or a standing position, just to try and give myself a little bit more, you know, or my muscles conditioned to holding a rifle. You know? Something I haven't done in a long time. This Airarms S410 is a lot lighter than what this spring rifle is, but as you can see, where my hand wants to sit here, my hand wants to sit there actually, you can see it's not balanced properly. It's sitting, it needs more weight up at the front, but because this rifle is mostly off the bipod out in the field, you know, you're ambushing more than anything, you don't really notice it. And standing shots, what I generally do is I've got a sling that goes on here, I switch it between one rifle and the other, get my arm in there and then pull it in nice and tight, and then that takes any of that extra weight, it just transfers it straight through into my collarbone. Well, not my collarbone, actually my pec, but you get the general idea. You can have a very heavy rifle and still have a perfectly balanced one. It's just lugging it around then becomes awkward. Shooting it, you won't really notice it. So let's come up with some scenarios then. Now we know what we should be looking for. We'll say our first permission is a rat infested farmyard. It's middle of winter, not so windy, but windy enough. You know, so we're mostly indoors really though before ratting. So what will we go for? Well, because we're going to have multiple targets, it's got to be a multi-shot, you know, so we're looking maybe it's pre-charged CO2. We want something with a lot of knockdown, so we're going to increase our calibre, so we want a larger calibre rifle, either 2.2 or .25, probably in this scenario 2.2 would be enough. You don't want to spend too much money on these little buggers. And because it's middle of winter, synthetic stock, possibly look at something like a bullpup, maybe even look at the skeletal type, just to make it, bring it in closer to us. So, you know, we're moving around machinery, farmyard doors, you know, we're not going to be knocking the barrel and moderators and this, that and the other off infrastructure. So that's what we'll go for. Something like BSA Ultra would be ideal for that, I think. Next permission, so let's come up with a golf course. So we've got big wide open spaces, very flat, you know, very exposed for the shooter, not much cover, bits of dead ground. So what we want is we want something that's going to be able to reach our targets before they dive for cover, you know, or we can sit and ambush them. But if we're on a stalk, we might need to take those longer shots, especially if it's nice calm balmy night with absolutely minor wind in there. We're talking sub 2 mile an hour winds. Well, again, I think we'll be looking at something like this S410 because it's a spring summer rifle, you know, with its wooden stock, or with, you know, tactical. It's never going to hurt you to go with a synthetic stock in any conditions, in my opinion. I just like wood, it just looks more traditional. Small calibre, so 177 in this case. We want maximum amount of range that we can get. We want accuracy, so again I've gone with a slightly longer barrel, although I'm running some tests at the minute, so forget barrel length, which is why I haven't included it. And again, multi-shot, because it just makes it a bit more manageable for us. We take a shot at a big rabbit, the smaller one, which is clearly going to be the offspring, sits there, panics, doesn't know what to do, bang, gone. But what if we wanted a rifle just to practice with? We just wanted something to get into the sport. We want something nice and simple, nothing, easy to maintain. We don't want loads of gear. Well, it's going to be spring or gas round. Okay, so where we're going to be shooting it? Field target ranges and indoor target ranges. Then okay, 177-22, ideal. 0.2 maybe, even if you wanted to use it for a bit of close range ratting as well. You could up the calibre slightly to the bigger end of the small calibre range. But small calibre gives you tighter groups because there's not as much surface area mothering the target. You know, spring rifles can be tuned, gas ram are fairly light. It's going to come down to really, you know, whether you want a synthetic stock, wooden stock, you know, probably go with gas ram. But if springing and conditioning is what you want, if condition is what you want and technique improvement, then you're probably looking at a heavy wooden stock, a heavy spring, and a big old piston to be able to manage as well, with a 177 calibre out the end. So that's the end of episode 1. Hope you found all this information useful. As always, feel free to comment, don't troll, and hopefully I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, bye.